Right, okay. So that's recording away. Hello and welcome to Unparliamentary Language, a podcast that is off the cuff, predicting things about the new year. So this will be going out in 2024, early 2024. We've just done our analysis of 2023, talked about our predictions, which we got broadly right. A few were maybe not quite exactly on the base, but this year presents us with, probably a general election and also the lead up to an American election. So I guess there's more scope for us to make some incorrect predictions, isn't there, Rob?
Yeah, bring it on. I'm all up. We were talking about our predictions from last year, and we wimped out too much. We were too safe. We sort of like predicted that water would still be wet and bears would still do their business in forested areas. So this year I'm going to go wild, and I think I need to be bold. We can be out there, really put our podcast on the map by putting a really bizarre prediction that will grab the headlines. So let's see what I can come up with.
So I guess we should start off first with so kind of separate from the parties.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a fun one to go for is we're expecting a general election this year.
It has to happen.
It could technically happen in January 2025, but I believe Sunak has ruled that out explicitly now. Most people would expect it to be this year. So I think we'll just take it as read. It will be 2024.
Yeah.
It would be very weird for it to be in January 2025.
Yeah.
It'd be very much like, I don't think anyone really wants to hang around that long in the Conservative Party at the moment. So yeah, I think it'd be a weird choice to do it then. So let's say it's in 2024. When do you want to predict it's going to fall? There's a few candidates. Do you want to talk through kind of the options?
Yeah, well, I think the main one I've heard of is May, right? A May election makes sense because you put yourself back on kind of like the old-fashioned impromptu electoral cycle. They tended to happen towards May. It's a good time of year where the politicians are a natural sort of reset in their time. I don't think anybody wants a Christmas general election again.
We said that. Yeah, we said in 2019 no one wants Christmas election. We had one. So.
We had one, but I think that was because that was like out of this. There was a ticking clock. There was a Brexit ticking clock. We had to get something done by December 31st, and having an election that concluded on December 13th made that viable, or made you be able to put up with it, even if it did lead to some of the more bizarre election campaign moments, like a Boris Johnson doing a Love Actually spoof. Nobody had that on their bingo cards for 2019. I can guarantee you that. So I think May seems like the most likely. What are the other candidates that you've heard of?
I think the two other candidates I've heard are kind of early autumn and, as you say, Christmas-ish.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously not on Christmas. It will be before. Like, there are very many reasons why you wouldn't want to force people to go out to the polls the week of Christmas. So
yes.
It would probably be similar if it was that period of time, early December.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the three candidates, I think.
Autumn might work. You sort of like where party conference season would naturally fall. People are in campaigning mode anyway, big speeches, writing. They may want that. I don't, as you said, I don't know how long this Conservative government wants to hang around for, or how much they want to stretch it out. It was often said of Gordon Brown's premiership that he should have called a general election when he got in, because it would have been more likely that he'd win that one, rather than letting the financial crash happen, essentially, and then having to deal with mopping that up in 2010. The Labour left it as late as possible before they could call that general election. And it is kind of a sign that your party is on the way out instantly if you leave it till the last moment, because it gives you the impression that you're clinging to power as long as you are legally allowed it before you give it up. I don't think Conservatives want to give off that impression, but they might do. But no, I'll firmly throw my hat into the ring for a May general election, which will mean about 4 to 6 weeks of campaigning before. It might be quite an interesting start to the year for us if that happens. I can't remember how many elections have we covered as a podcast. Is it 3 now? Did we cover May Corbyn, or we
covered May Corbyn, but I think that was a special episode of How Many Things, which is how we kind of started off this productive professional relationship as well as being friends anyway. So yes, I think May is definitely high in the chart. Like, so there's various bits of information we have seen. So people are like, oh, they're starting to hire election officials for May. But there are also local elections in May. So that's not necessarily the silver bullet people think it is for prediction of the date. We have a date for the budget, and it's the earliest budget we've had in years. But it's still in March, which is when they always are. So, maybe it is giving an extra week's leeway to ensure you can have a run-up to an election. Sure. For the purposes of making this slightly interesting, and if we said last time we're a bit too sensible, you've picked May. I'm going to firmly plump myself down in an early autumn, kind of early October kind of one, only because when I discussed with my man in Westminster a little while back, that was kind of maybe on the cards was the suggestion. I think things have probably changed since then, but yeah, let's go. Let's put in two different predictions.
Yeah,
so
let's do it.
So one of us can be wrong and one of us can be right. So
wild stuff happening.
I legitimately think a Christmas one would be an awful idea.
Nobody wants that. Like,
I don't even think Sunak wants that.
No, I think I think they just know that would be a hiding to nothing, because people would just resent them for holding on to power as long as they can and kind of making it all about Christmas. Yeah, I think last time they had a definitive reason. This time round, the reason isn't strong enough.
First off, who do we think is going to win the general election? I think that's the easier choice right now with the polls. I think, we're both going to firmly say it's going to be a Labour win, right?
Yes, I think that's...
I think, as we've said, the polls are like 98% chance of a Labour win, but not necessarily a majority, essentially. But it's still a pretty high percentage chance of a majority, and it does look like they have quite a lot. At the moment, it looks like it's going to be bigger than the 7 landslide from the polls we've seen. I'm going to bring up those... we didn't do the polls in the last episode. I'll bring up our usual poll website, just see the general election prediction, what it's saying right now, because it will be interesting to see if that's changed. Because it will have updated end of November, so we may have caught that already in an episode. But they're currently predicting seats for Labour, 459 seats for Labour, 120 Conservatives. That is honestly pretty ridiculous still. That's a giant. I don't know if you have the 1997 general election.
That's just what I was looking up. So in 1997, Labour won 418 seats. The Conservatives 165. Lib Dems 46.
Yeah, so this is predicting less for the Lib Dems. So it's kind of expecting a few more to go to Labour. It's also making an assumption that the SNP are going to lose seats to Labour and not the Conservatives. I think that's probably fair based on Scottish people I've spoken to. If SNP lose more seats, I would expect them to go to Labour as opposed to the Conservatives, because I don't meet many people in Scotland who like the Conservatives. So I mean, I'm happy to plant my flag in the ground and say we're going to have Labour's going to win, and with a bigger majority than in 7, which will be absolutely wild. It's going to be interesting. If that happens, we'll talk about it. But that's kind of a similar turning of the leaf, probably another 3 years of Labour government, 3 sessions of Labour government, if that is what happens. Yeah,
which is, I think, so that's the big prediction I want to talk about. It's like, I think we all know Labour are going to win almost, like the most people assume that much. The numbers all point to it. 98% is pretty firm, isn't it? And that when you say that's like the other 2% is like maybe coalition, possibly. So it's all the interesting prediction is about the size of the Labour win. I can't bring myself to say that it's going to be bigger than 97. And
I mean, I'm here to make the more.
No.
I'm not the political expert.
And I think, but the fact is that you're looking at data, right? And this is what happens with me. Like, you are actually looking at data. You're being more responsible. You're looking at the polls. You're going through all of that, and you're saying all the numbers are pointing towards Labour having it better than 1997. And my gut is saying, but it can't be. And I don't know if that's because that I kind of... So I was alive during the 97 election, but I was 8. I don't know if I was particularly politically conscious at the time of
I
what was
remember
going...
my parents kind of hooping and hollering and cheering because it was a change, a significant change. I obviously don't remember all the Conservative stuff. Like, I was a small kid.
Yeah. And the way that it's sort of like been presented to me in like film and television and books and all this thing is that it was like a landmark. Like this was the time for change. all of a sudden, Tony Blair was the rock star who came out of nowhere, who people were like cheering in the streets for, and he made it cool Britannia. And I'm like, well, if that's what happened, and if that's what it was like in 1997, I get zero of those vibes from Keir Starmer, right?
Sure, yes.
So like the enthusiasm, the need for change, like that same kind of new Labour's here and it's cool, and your grandmother and your cousin will vote for them too. Like that kind of vibe doesn't feel like it's there for Labour right now. I don't feel like it's a 97 moment that Keir Starmer doesn't have Starmerism? Keirism? I don't know what this called, but like Blairism was a thing, Thatcherism was a thing. I don't know if I could pin my mast and say what Keir Starmer stands for in that same way. But I don't.
While I understand that, I'm not sure. Other than Bojo, I don't think we've had anyone since Blair who has had, like, we haven't. We would have Cameronites or whatever they're called.
Yeah,
but we didn't have. I didn't feel like we had Cameronism.
Yes,
we just kind of went, oh, he seems like the general vibe of the country is he's not Labour, who we've had for a while, and he seems fairly sensible.
Yep.
Oh, he was in a coalition. Let's give him a chance on his own. And then the Brexit thing. So, if he hadn't have done that, he probably would have got another term, kind of slowly losing his majority, one would expect. Yeah. I don't think we really had. I'm not sure that's where politics is anymore. I'm not sure you can be the cool guy who pulls the wool over their eyes.
Yeah.
I say that knowing full well that certain people will still vote for Boris Johnson because he seemed like a nice guy. But I feel like, I'd like to think people this time around are going, that seems vaguely sensible over there. It's not the current lot. I'm sure you can. I've had conversations over the Christmas period and people are like, well, Labour is bad. And I'm like, they're not. That's the thing. We're seeing all this corruption coming out of the Tory party right now. And I think most people will be like, well, we should at least give the other guys a chance. And if that's maybe we'll find the tail is shorter. Like people are saying, maybe in America, get to America.
Yeah.
They're saying, maybe Biden can't carry, maybe Biden's a one-term president because Trump's got this kind of cult personality. We'll see. We'll see. We'll discuss that in the prediction bit for that. Maybe that's the same thing. It's like, we're going to pick Keir Starmer because he's just not the Conservatives. And if they then pick a really interesting Bojo-like leader, not that I can think of one off the top of my head right now, but if they find someone, then maybe they could come back after only 5 years and be like, we're back. I'm not sure that's how it's gone. Looking historically, we tend to get fairly long chunks of each party.
Yes, you do. Although, I think the current Conservatives would make a good point of how they've had 13 straight years, but that hasn't been a very simple straight 13 years of one person in power. There's the reason that we don't have Cameronism is because he wasn't in power for all those 13 years. If he was, maybe we would have a better idea of what that was and what that entailed. I think my problem where it seems different to 97 is that is this an enthusiasm gap? Is this going to be an election of enthusiasm? Or is it going to be one of apathy? And by that, I mean, are people enthusiastic for Keir Starmer, or are they so apathetic towards the Conservatives? You'll get a large majority of the population who still don't like Labour, but don't like the Conservatives enough, which means that they simply stay at home and don't vote. And kind of the hidden truth of the 97 election is that a lot of Conservative voters did do that, and that did contribute to Labour's landslide victory in 97 as well. But the history books portray it more favourably. The cooler way to portray it is that, Tony Blair was the new rock star in politics. So what I say is, when I think to say it's a new 97 to me feels mad because it doesn't feel the same. But I don't know what it was actually like in 97. And I don't know how much of that is retroactive history, people like me, stupid political commentators who want to try and put a few chapters in their book that say, I've got to think of a reason, I've got to look at the reason of why Labour did so well, and they over-egg the pudding on the Blair stuff and ignore some of the Conservative apathy.
I just think one more thing to throw in there is, I think if you look at the economy, it's the economy stupid. I know Blair was saying education. That was obviously important. But from an economic point of view, we are currently going through some bad economic times.
Yeah.
So let's try the other people.
Yep.
Which will probably be a decent vote winner, I expect. But I'm not saying the Conservatives turned it around, but the 90s was generally a good time for all.
Yes.
For the like, there are things like I'm sure you look back, like the 90s was generally felt quite progressive overall. Like there's still people who can point out like now that films in the 2000s and 2010s have been, less diverse in certain way. Like, you often don't pass the Bechdel test, don't have as many women leads, etc. as films in the 90s. Have we jumped forwards in other ways? Yes, more trans representation, stuff like this, great. But like the 90s kind of felt like, we're moving out of the 80s, which was like, even though Thatcher was still around in the early 90s, like obviously I was very young at this point, and so it's kind of the vibe, but you kind of get the vibe that like, the 80s was very, well, it was bright and colourful. It was very like, Gordon Gekko, coffees, everyone having too many espressos, market crashes, that kind of stuff. And the early 90s was like, we can have all the things and all the colourful plastics and all the toys. And obviously part of that is I was a kid enjoying all the toys, so I missed out on a lot of the hardships. I get that. But I think while the scandals were different, we talked about this before, the scandals were often like, this Conservative MP is secretly gay and that's not okay because it was the 90s. And, despite, as I was saying, things being like, there was a lot more homophobia. We didn't have as many rights for LGBT people. We didn't have gay marriage or any of that kind of stuff at the time. So there was obviously a lot to fix on the social side. But I think from an economic point of view, people probably felt okay, especially by 97. I think maybe in the early 90s, there was a bit of a house price crash in like 92, 93, I think. But that's like in the middle of Conservative rule. It's not near the end of it. So maybe like coming out, and I guess coming out to the millennium, like there was this feeling of like things are going to change somehow. The internet's here. But like that was kind of came in bits and drabs. I don't think we have that like feeling in the populace right now.
It's just generally like a more like hope for the future isn't as rampant now as it was back then. I get what you mean,
but also that's an age thing for us, right? Like when I was a kid, of course I was hopeful for the future. I was like 8, but now I'm in my 30s. I'm much more like, okay, I mean, it'd be nice to have someone who doesn't mess it like. And I think we were talking in the previous episode about how like the collective kind of memory, like people aren't really remembering Brexit anymore. It's happened. People aren't remembering COVID so much. Moved on from it as a general, still putting a strain on the NHS. Part of the reason NHS waiting lists haven't been fixed is because of knock-on effects of long COVID and stuff like that. But all of that being said, I think people still remember Truss as bad. And like, I know that Sunak is not, but like, I think there's definitely people who are like, well, if the Conservatives could inflict Truss upon us, I know they have Sunak, right? But like, we've seen this stuff. Like we talked about Braverman maybe trying to go, like, there is enough. There's enough going on within the MPs of the Conservative Party right now that they could potentially put through someone absolutely awful in a few years if they decide it, and we wouldn't have a say. And I think that, I'd like to think that people are taking that into consideration. Not everyone understands exactly how everything works. I get that, but I'd like to think people are like, Liz Truss, that was really bad, and like we didn't pick her, and we didn't pick the guy. I'd like to hope that message gets through.
Yes, and I think you're right. I think my main point is that like, it's a difference between data and vibes. Like, the vibes don't feel as vibey as 97, but maybe, as you said, for all of those contextual reasons, there's a lot of reasons why, and that the maths will still win out and they will still get more. And I'm looking at the 97 result now, and if they surpass that, there's loads of reasons why I think that is absolutely incredible for Labour, as in, we suspect the SNP will lose seats in Scotland. The SNP only won 6 seats in 1997. They weren't the same political force there. So Keir Starmer will have defeated both the Conservatives and the SNP, 2 parties on different flanks that attack him from either side. He will have been able to make gains in both of those if he gets a bigger election victory. That's amazing. The Lib Dems, I think maybe he's got an advantage there where the Lib Dems are still slowly recovering from the post-2015 election results and might not quite reach the height. They've got 46 here under Paddy Ashdown in 97. They'll probably be aiming for that similar amount of results when we have an election next year. But yeah, it would be absolutely incredible. There are lots of parallels as well between the election we're going to have and 97. You mentioned that people didn't like Liz Truss or what she'd done. The big thing they always talk about Liz Truss is that she tanked the economy, right? When you had the Conservatives under Major, they had Black Wednesday, which was when they tried to enter the European exchange rate mechanism failed, had to pull the pound out. We lost a load of money in one day. The economy recovered. By the time the election happened in 1997, the economy had fully recovered from that result. Did it matter? No. The economic credibility of the Conservatives had gone by the fact they were able to do so much damage in the short term. Yeah, precisely. Yeah. So I think that's the other reason why the Conservatives are maybe struggling a lot, is that economic Conservatives, or sometimes it is about vibes. It is about, I remember what Truss did those years ago. I don't feel I can trust it. That's why they had to get rid of her, because they wanted to try and move on from that. I don't think they successfully have. But yeah, I guess getting back to our main point, you think it's going to be bigger than 97. I'm going to step back and I'm going to say it's not going to quite reach that bit. I would love it. I would love it if it happened. It would be a hell of a moment. But I can't bring myself to believe.
I mean, I think I would argue that actually what you're predicting is probably better for the country. I think if we have, like, in the current climate, I appreciate there's things like the SNP have messed things up for themselves. Maybe people will forgive them come a general election.
Yeah.
But, there are some specific things that make it easier right now for Starmer to do what previous Labour leaders haven't been able to achieve recently. But I would argue that if we go to a giant Labour majority, that is also a problem.
Yeah.
That's how you get these problems. And, arguably we do need a swing back, and you want Labour to have a majority for a while. But, like, if we get into essentially a two-party system like the US, I don't like that for the UK. We've discussed before about voting systems and how first past the post is not very good. And yeah, I think the only kind of hope there is that Starmer is kind of putting himself more as a centrist than being like. It's not that I don't like left policies, to be clear, but it's like that if you go, if we do a giant swing to the left and then a giant swing to the right, it doesn't really feel like we're making progress over time. And I think that's what the US is seeing, where they're like, well, we have to stop Trump, flip to Biden. Oh, and then now people are going, he's not very good at the economy, which we'll get onto in our later predictions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure that's productive for our democracy if we have a massive swing to Labour and then they can just do what they want for a bit. But also, to an extent, we do need them to get through stuff that undoes various things the Conservatives have done that are bad. You don't want to get into the situation where the entire point of government is undoing what the last government did. I don't think that's the kind of policies Keir Starmer's put. Like, we've discussed stuff like HS2 in the last episode, where I think he's just going to say, well, this is a shit thing that's been passed down to me. We'll stay with it. And therefore, you're not undoing everything. And there is generally progress, but like the arrow of time generally points towards progress. There's lots of things people like to think about with nostalgic eyes. And then you read about people in, the 1950s not having electricity and running water. And you're like, well, yeah, we have got further than that. But yes, bit of a ramble there at the end of the general election.
No, that's fine. I think we can touch on more of that later as we go through the party.
So, yeah, Conservatives.
Yeah.
So, I mean, first up prediction is if we think they're going to lose the general election, which we've already covered in the general election segment, presumably that means we've got Sunak gone.
Yep.
Is there any obvious candidate waiting in the wings you can think of who would take? Because we'll just, if they lose, Sunak's gone.
Yeah,
that's easy. That's not really a prediction. That's just a given if our previous prediction is correct.
Yeah.
I, off the top of my head, can't, like we've discussed Suella Braverman, but don't, maybe they give her a bit of a time in the sun while they're in opposition and then actually get rid of her before the next general election. But like we've been talking about how there's not much talent in the Conservative Party and they're about to lose a load of MPs who are kind of clocked out. So how do they recover?
You're right that they've got an absolutely huge challenge. They've got lots of people who've been Conservatives for a long time saying that this will be their last general election where they stand. We've had more of a churn through the party than we usually would, as like when Labour had to come back after their loss with Gordon Brown. What you have, let's compare and contrast Labour and the Conservatives for a while here with their long times in leadership. Blair was leader for a long, long time until it looked like he'd finally lost his shine after Iraq and everything. He stepped down after the 2005 election, gave it over to the obvious successor, the people that everybody thought like, okay, well, it's clear those two are a partnership and he's been wanting to be elected for a long time. Gordon Brown.
And as we know, they had like a deal where it's like, when I step down, you'll get to go in the limelight.
Yeah. So that was kind of like a managed transition of power, but you still had a lot of people in the background who had cabinet experience, who had been junior positions for a long, long time, who were ready to step up. And in the end, that turned out to be Ed Miliband rather than his brother, the other Miliband.
The other less famous Miliband.
Yes. Yeah. What was his name? I've forgotten his name.
John, Jim, I don't know.
David.
Possibly David Miliband,
possibly David.
They look very similar.
Yes.
But, but one of them, like, because they went against each other in that race.
Did. Yes, that was the big drama.
Ed is... I don't know if the other guy is as it, but like Ed was just in the limelight more, and has done stuff since that has been vaguely sensible. Yeah,
and clearly there's a churn, and then you had Jeremy Corbyn being elected, who was an outsider, who was there to specifically change the party away from a message of like, no, this is not New Labour, this is more like traditional Labour as it was, bring back the left of the party, and that was successful for a while. And now you've got Keir. The Conservatives, on the other hand, you have had a lot of people. You might have said if Cameron had been in charge all this time, or if Boris had been in charge, Liz Truss is the obvious person to take over. She's got a clear vision. I might argue that Liz Truss would have been a better leader of the opposition because she can.
Yeah, because she could just say wild stuff. She could say, can do in opposition and be like, "Look, why aren't they doing my wild plan that will clearly work?"
And it doesn't tank the economy.
It doesn't matter. Yes.
Yeah, so that's why you have people like that around, people who are like, oh, they'll never actually be leader, but opposition, she'd be good. The Conservatives, I think they're really struggling to have the depth of talent or the right side. I think it's about which wing of the Conservative Party would lead. So I think you've got those like your Priti Patels, your Suella Bravermans, who are lumped in as hardliners, Brexiteers, have run in the past, clearly have ambitions to be leader.
They also have, specifically Priti Patel, like they can play to... We may sit there and go, it's weird that they have this strong stance on immigration when their parents are immigrants, but it does play well to a certain portion of the public. And they can sit there and say, we're more diverse, we're women.
Yes.
We tick a load of boxes off the bat, even if our policies seem to be absolutely awful.
It is weird. Yeah. That's the a sidebar here for a moment, but the people who decry wokeness in all its forms are really desperate to have like a brown woman as their leader just so they can tick those woke boxes and be safe. You know, it's like they won't go full, oh, we need a white man and I'm going to stress they need a white man. They need a little bit of, token representation if they want so they can have their terrible policies.
It's fine if the representation is... there's a whole... Not in the... this podcast has already been going on for long enough that we can't really dive into it, but there's a whole thing about, we've talked about this before, like pulling up the bridge after you've come in concept that happens. But yes, you could see it because Keir Starmer, white guy, grey hair, like he's like we think he's gonna be fine, but like it'd be a very easy attack, being like, well, here we have someone of Indian descent and a woman. You haven't had, in the same way the Conservatives consider to say we've had 2 women prime ministers.
Yeah, exactly.
Three women prime ministers.
3 women prime ministers.
Even if one was only around for 2 weeks. And it's like, they go, Labour, what about you? And it's like, yeah, but like, I mean,
things they did in office. Yeah.
We have said, looking back, Theresa May actually not as bad as we thought at the time, various issues, but like, I think most people I speak to still not a fan of Thatcher.
Yes.
I don't think you have to go very far to find somebody who's like, Liz Truss really helped us out.
Yeah.
So, and obviously we shouldn't be judging like there should be more female prime ministers, there should be more prime ministers of colour. That's a very clear thing that should happen going forwards. But it does open up an easy attack line.
It does. Yeah. And so in try and let's bring it back to our original prediction of who we think will take the lead. You've got those on the right of the party, like Priti and Suella, who are in strong position. You've got those in the centre. I think it's probably likely that Penny Mord will run. She was attempting to run when they had that leadership election with Rishi Sunak, but she was unable to get all the votes. People remember her for, looking like she did at the King's coronation. So there are those big memories. Arms. Yeah, big arm, but she's kind of somebody who people might recognise, so that appeals to the wider general public. The problem that the Conservatives have is that the people who vote on the final person are the members. And of course, the members last time voted for Liz Truss. It's quite clear where the members lie and where their politics lie. And I think it is to the right of the party. So I think you will find people like Suella and Pretty, maybe even Kemi Banadoc. We haven't talked much about her, but
she's also on the wild, I've invented a problem in schools so I can hate trans people.
Oh yeah. No, I think her politics are absolutely terrible, but she ran a oddly successful campaign in the Rishi Sunak Liz Truss one and was ultimately pushed out because the right of the party decided to form behind Liz Truss rather than anybody else. So if there is a leadership election, I think you will find those on the right vying for their candidates, because remember, it's all done within the MPs and the party. And I guess, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's just a question I have here, and this is in itself kind of a prediction, but
yeah,
where are we going to be losing Conservative MPs?
I was just about, that just pinged in my mind as well. As like, oh yeah, if you lose a load of, we talked about the group last time that was pushing their agenda, like for the Rwanda plan, and saying how they weren't going to support it. They were called the New Conservatives, and it's kind of the Lee Anderson group. They're the people who got elected in red wall seats thanks to Boris Johnson. And they say, oh, we're a new Conservative. We're not old-fashioned rural types. We represent working class areas who have conservative values. This is the type of Conservative party we'd like leading forward. There's a big chance Labour could wipe those out. If Labour retakes the red wall, your Lee Andersons and those types could be gone by 2024, in which case, if you're left with your more rural-leaning ones, it's possible that the centre of the Conservative Party does take over. But then the problem the Conservatives have is, do their MPs, are they at odds with their membership? The same problem that Labour had when they elected Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, vastly more popular amongst the membership than he ever was amongst his own MPs. And he only was able to gain his MPs' respect when he had the successful election result against Theresa May.
But the difference being, because it's a different, all the systems are different and confusing, but because you have to vote through the MPs first, presumably by the time you go to the membership, you've managed to whittle out the very right wing.
Well, the very right wingers, but it might be that if you've got...
So it could be maybe Penny Mordaunt versus Priti Patel.
Yes, it depends what your factions are. Yeah, so if there are 60 MPs on the right of the party and 80 MPs left, predicting the Conservatives get 140 seats, which bizarrely is a possibility. But you could have that split, and clearly that means that you wouldn't end up with two central candidates. You probably end up with one from either side of the party, and see how you go. So I reckon that they are probably going to go for, there we go, all the candidates I've suggested there are female. 3 of them are not white as their ones. I think that is the direction that the Conservatives are going. They will pick a female, non-white candidate to lead their party, and then that party will be very mean to females and to non-white people with their policies, and it'll be fine because one of them is leading it, so it's all okay. But yeah, so the Conservative Party, I think, will certainly lurch to the right because that's where their membership.
I kind of wanted to say it'll be Penny Mordaunt just to disagree. So I'm going to put that out there. But I feel like that's a very good reasoning for why it will be. And it wouldn't surprise. And also you have that benefit of you can kind of get the wild sounding ideas out while you know you're not going to have power.
Yeah.
To an extent. Like they can rail about things that Keir Starmer's doing that they don't like. But actually, like at that point, most people are happy to keep Labour in. And we'll see how long that goes, but yeah.
They can do the GB News things where you just say things and you don't worry about the consequences. Like the reason Rishi Sunak can't just say those things is because he has real consequences behind his actions. If he says those things, he has to put them into policies. That doesn't work in opposition. I can just say it.
So we briefly mentioned Labour there at the end. So moving on to Labour. So if we, again, taking our initial set of predictions as correct, we assume there will be after a general election, we will have a Labour leader, and a Labour Prime Minister, and that will be Keir Starmer. So at the moment, I guess our kind of big thing, we're waiting on his manifesto. I believe he said it's going to be out in January or ready in January. I guess ready in January, and they will only publish it once the general election is announced because they don't want to get caught out by the Conservative. Like they all try and release them in the same week so that no like suddenly sneak in an extra policy that they push from you. So do you have a feeling for where Keir Starmer is taking the country, assuming he wins, which we are assuming.
Keir's approach has always been like, again, I'm stealing this from Private Eye. They had that Private Eye. They had Keir Starmer's Christmas message.
Yeah.
And it was, I wish you all a very sensible Christmas, right? He's all about being sensible and realistic, and you're starting to see it in some of his speeches now. It's the type of thing Obama did when he was, comparing Keir Starmer and Obama seems wild. They are very different politicians in terms of like vibes and energy behind them. But one thing Obama did when it became clear that he was going to win, or became clear that it was likely he was going to win, and you see it in his election, in his victory speech, and you're starting to see things in Keir's speeches now where it's like, by the way, we won't be able to solve things overnight.
Yeah.
Things are going to be hard. Like everything you vote for, we've got to set expectations. I'm not going to come in day one and all of a sudden prices will be
There's
lower.
no magic money tree.
Yeah, precisely.
As we found out previously.
Yeah. So his policies and the directions he's taking them in, I reckon, will be centrist, sensible, working on sort of like established economic principles. He won't want to... What he may have to do to resolve things might require a bigger shakeup, but I don't think he wants to upset the apple cart too much as soon as he gets into power, because I believe his whole manifesto and his whole vibe going in there will be, if you are a business, if you are, if you are somebody in a position of power and you are fed up of all the chaos that's happened, Brexit through COVID, all these disruptions to your industry, the last thing you want is me coming in and upsetting things again by suddenly saying, and taxes are now 50% on everything. You don't want to have like what's happening in Argentina at the moment. Yes. I don't know if you're keeping
I just listened to an episode about Planet Money.
A brief eye on him. Like he's come in and he's ripped everything up, right? And that is shaking things up entirely. Keir Starmer's, he's going to be the exact opposite of that in so many ways. But he will want, in his initial ploy will be, I will want consistency in some areas, particularly when it comes to the economy. However, in these important flash issues, okay, on immigration, I'll control immigration, but I'll do it in a sensible way rather than a Rwanda scheme. Stuff like that. That's how he's going to pitch himself. And he might also, we've seen it in previous party conference speeches where he's talked about some like nationalisation plans. If he goes for anyone that's going to get those on the left of his party or those who are on the left of politics to agree, it'll be nationalisation efforts. He's already talked about a national energy company, a bit like EDF in France. He wants to do that. That's been something he said before. I think they'll still go ahead with that. They might talk about rail as well as an industry that is widely seen to be, not very efficient since it's gone private. So that's like a more popular one to go.
Trains, to me, maybe even above energy in my mind.
Yeah.
Trains, because we have currently about half the train companies are actually nationalised.
Yeah.
So we have LNER and all of this stuff, and they're essentially nationalised and doing better than private. So I think that's an easy win right now. So as long as you're not ideologically opposed to it, like the Conservatives seem to be.
Little bit of red meat for your left wing, but mostly central to make sure that you don't upset too many people. Hey, kind of what New Labour promised change, but they kind of came in and said the big change Labour did was we're abandoning loads of our left-wing policies to make sure that we are more in line with current economic thinking, the economic thinking that had been established by Thatcher, but they stressed that they would do that with a social conscience and that they would put that money back into the state and help fund people and help improve more people's lives with that money rather than looking to drive up the profits of big companies. Kind of what, I don't want to say that he's doing third way politics again, but he's kind of that's the vibes. But he can't say New Labour because then you associate it with Tony Blair, and Tony Blair is unpopular, so you can't say that. So he's walking that time.
But I think, like you say, as long as, say, nationalising the railways vaguely improves service, which it looks like it should, then your central people are going to be like, oh yeah, the trains have got better. That's the thing people notice. The commuters who are getting the train every day will go, oh, the trains are slightly more efficient. That's all you need to see to continue voting that way. And then, as you say, the left wing people are, oh, this is ideologically what I want. If I were to I think if I were to predict specific policies that would be in there, I think he'd probably put up nationalising railways. Maybe that's the thing he would do after he comes in.
Yeah.
I think he'd put it in there because it's an easy. I think it's an easy win. I think most people I speak to are like, this would not be the same as British Rail as was, which had problems.
Yeah.
And we know that right now, running at the state level, etc., work better. So I think this is the closest we've been in a long time to being at a point where nationalising the railways is a viable, easy option. What else? I don't think he's going to have anything specific about HS2 in the manifesto, because he's just going to say, oh, well, the Tories have left me with this rubbish situation. I'm stuck with it. I think that's a shame. I think they should be like, oh, this land the Tories sell off the last few months, we claim get back, and then actually continue with HS2, because this whole levelling up the north hasn't really leveled up the north. I don't know if you saw the other day the thing where they were saying, oh, we're using the HS2 North money to improve roads in London.
Yes.
Which quickly got taken off Twitter. But not a good look for the Conservatives. What are some other policies, I think, clear? One thing I want to touch on, and this is maybe your opinion. So I have seen a lot of discussion about, so there's a lot of very transphobic people in the Conservative Party. It's the current group of people who kind of get bashed in the media. There's this whole kind of panic around trans people in bathrooms and stuff, which is all completely unfounded. I don't think in the manifesto there's going to be a strong message about this. I think Keir, my impression of Keir is he's been playing things safe when it comes to, he hasn't stood up there and said, I support trans rights loudly and proudly. He has kind of used weasel words and stuff, but I think, I like to hope this is the case. I mean, in general, I think he's on the side of kind of like justice and people being left to themselves. So I think he is generally on the side of trans people, but he's not saying it out loud, which I appreciate is an important message that needs to be sent. And he's not sending that message. I don't think there's going to be anything specific about LGBT rights. Maybe they'll touch on the, because the Conservatives have passed the thing about conversion therapy rights. That's all through. So I think they probably won't really mention it too much. I don't think that's going to be a strong plank of the manifesto. But I would expect that there's probably going to be some policies once they're in power that are more pro. But I think there's a level of, there are certainly some Labour MPs who are outspokenly anti-trans. And so I think there's a level of, they can't say it in the manifesto because they feel it's going to be a vote loser right now. So, I guess my prediction is there won't be a specific thing about LGBT rights and how people in the manifesto. I'm very much hoping that in reality it ends up being a better, like I've seen people saying, oh, it's not going to be any better under Labour than it is right now under Conservative. I would like to think it is going to be better overall, purely because there are less people who are like, I absolutely hate this section of humanity for no good reason. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I do. So I think that you're right, because unfortunately it's a controversial issue and is one where, like, the reason Conservatives talk about it is because they think it wins them votes. I think that is the reason why it's suddenly become a big cultural issue, because it's maybe
one of the culture war. They can put a wedge in here and say
it's a last bastion of the culture war that says, that's why we're different from Labour here. So Keir Starmer won't want it to be a culture war issue. So he might try to avoid it entirely. I hope he doesn't. What I really hope for is that, if it comes up on a debate stage, if they decide to do debates again, because remember the last few elections, like Boris Johnson refused to do it, and all that jazz. But if they do it, I would love to see those transphobic ideas attacked head on and put in a debate, because I think they go unchallenged far too much in the general media. And that is why those transphobic ideas prevail, because people hear one version from what the Daily Telegraph says, and they don't get to hear the other side. They hear the very one-sided propaganda of one media organisation and say, that kind of thinks what I think, and they move on with their day. They don't tend to sort of, because a lot of that is also fear-mongering. I feel a lot of it is like overflowing issues that don't exist. We've talked about, like, in the past about, the NHS, splitting men and women maternity ones, and then you look at the actual data and they say women who have complained about trans women in maternity wards is equal to 0, or trans men in maternity wards 0. Whatever the issue is, the data doesn't back it up, but these people just say these things. So I think I would agree with you that he will look to avoid the issue on the whole. We've talked about him playing it safe. he might see it as too controversial to bring up, might feel that it would be more likely to lose him voters than win them. Unfortunately, if you're looking at it from a purely mathematical sense, if you want to break it down to logic, they don't make up that large amount of the electorate, then probably not seen as a big swing vote in many of the places. It means he can legitimately ignore them if he wants to and still win the election. But I hope once in power, and I really hope that if he was directly challenged, he has the backbone to stand up for that.
What other things do you think there's going to be? There's a few kind of topics related to the economy that may come. So I think there's housing, which is a current problem, and then I guess any other general economic stuff you think might come up. So like, I guess like the important things to most people: economy first, and then also schooling is important. So, so do you think they're going to make a specific pledge? Like, I think they have already said they're going to at least match what the Conservatives have said for housing.
Yeah.
But I feel like we need more housing than that. That's the current problem, is we don't have enough housing.
Housing comes up at every election, right? And they always say a target and they don't meet it.
They never
meet it. So I wonder what like the point is of him saying a target other than saying, yeah, we'll do more housing. More housing is such an easy thing. The problem is getting it done. So he either has to say in the manifesto how he's going to get it done, or that number is pointless, in my opinion. We're talking about schools. I think schools is actually a really easy win for Labour. They have to make the big thing they have to do when they're talking about economics is how they fund it, because the big problem that we've had under the Conservatives in general is that places start to run out of money, right? Like schools have been underfunded for a while. Hospitals will have been underfunded, but they pumped more money into that because of COVID. It still isn't enough. Councils are starting to fail, starting to be bankrupt because they can't meet the funding goals set by the government. We would all love it if they had more money, but we need to make sure that money is responsibly sourced and where your sums are. So Keir Starmer, I think, would say, yes, more money for schools would be a vote winner. People are seeing the impact of that, not only with something flashy like RAC, which was the big scandal that happened at the start of this year. I don't remember if we talked about it a lot in a podcast.
We touched on it in our news segment.
Yeah, but that was like a huge own goal, a huge mistake from the Conservatives to say, welcome back to school, everybody. By the way, your pupils might be crushed by concrete that is out of date, that we knew was out of date 5 years ago, but didn't do anything about. That's a bad look. So I think I confidently say Labour can probably get a better manifesto promise than, we'll get concrete in your school that won't kill your children. Like they might word it a bit differently, but that's how they've got to present it to people and get it ahead like that. In terms of housing, they'll just say a number. They always do. Schools, more money, but look at the sums, make sure that their bits are independently funded and verified. You'll hear a lot about that in the general election as well. We've had our manifesto promises. We've had all of this costed, and this says that the economy will be fine, because I think there were some predictions that were put in, even under Boris Johnson, but particularly the thing that killed Liz Truss to an extent was that she refused to have the emergency budget verified by anybody independent. That's what spooked the markets. Keir Starmer, sensible, doesn't want to spook the markets, so we'll have all of his sums. Well, it'll be boring, but I don't think he needs, as I was trying to say before when we were looking back at our predictions, he doesn't need to be flashy. He doesn't need the bizarre idea to attract voters. He's got them. He just needs to be sensible and make sure that he can make his ideas a reality.
Kind of on that point of maybe the final point on Labour here, for kind of talking about manifesto promises. I mean, he can make tax changes if he doesn't make a manifesto promise. But like, we've had this weird situation right now where Tories are kind of giving away a tax break, but actually, in reality, in 3 months, because they don't move the percentages. They don't move the money at which your percentages change due to inflation. People are now actually paying more tax on their salary, because if you were, if your salary has raised in line with inflation, you may have gone over into the next tax bracket. So they basically so it means they can offer this national insurance thing they're offering us in January. Which, sounds great, a bit more money back. The Conservatives do that quite a lot, but actually, in reality, after 2 or 3 months, you're worse off. Do we think Labour are going to have any specific policies relating to tax? I mean, they could do something very simple, like an extra 1 penny on it. There's always Lib Dems had it for ages. An extra 1 penny on inheritance tax, or not inheritance, sorry, an extra 1 penny on income tax will solve all these problems because it'll give us this much money. It's like, yeah, because if every pound I earn has an extra penny off it, I will notice, but not massively.
Yeah.
And then the government is able to do that times millions of people, so it earns a lot of money that way. Do we think there's anything specific that's obvious for him, or is he just going to... I mean, he has to fund any changes somehow.
Precisely. Yeah. So I think tax in particular will be a really interesting question coming this next general election. You've heard it a lot from Conservatives complaining about their own party. Their own party has been forced to raise taxes to the highest level.
Highest tax burden since World War II.
World War II, all of that jazz, that the Conservatives are in power to raise. The fact that they are raising taxes while in power is almost seen as like a mark of shame against a Conservative government, because you are meant to reduce taxes. That's what you do. It would appear the economic reality demands quite a high amount of tax at the moment, and people would expect a Labour government to tax more, because that tends to be how they fund most of their cuts. If Keir Starmer can find a way to do his sums where he cuts some tax, maybe that might require the cutting of some services, but services that the Conservatives would seem as more important than ones that Labour do. If he's able to bring in a tax cut, I think that would blow people's tiny little minds and would certainly shoot the Conservatives out the water. If the Conservatives, I assume Rishi Sunak will do like his budget before, will be tax cuts for everyone. The economy can survive 3 months if we do this, and then maybe we can trick people into voting for us. Like, that'll be his policy. So I don't think, like, Labour, will like to go into a manifesto saying we're going to raise taxes. I think they're going to be really clever. I think you'll probably see more taxes on big business. They'll like say like super corporation tax, Google, whatever. We're going to tax these big businesses more. That's where we're going to make up the deficit. We're going to keep the tax burden off of ordinary people and put it back onto some of these larger corporations. That's a better way to get your message across than the Conservatives, of course, would never tax large corporations. Yes, yeah. They want them to flourish as much as possible. So that might be the big difference between the two parties. But this is me entirely spitballing. Now, maybe Labour HQ has very different ideas.
So, yeah, not really a firm prediction, but some ideas that maybe we can visit and see how it fell. I think one more thing I want to throw in, because I feel like it's an easy win, is I think a very sensible and easy thing to do is raise. So in the Help to Buy, we had Help to Buy ISAs. We now have a thing called Lifetime ISA. Yeah. And if you use that to buy your first home, you get 25% of the value of your ISA up to whatever it is back from the government for free. Yeah. So it's a really good return on investment, but you have to use it specifically to buy a home to get that benefit. Basically the same as how the Help to Buy ISA did it, but the Lifetime ISA has more options. You can stuff. The big problem is they wrote the rules and they said, this is the maximum value of a property you can buy with this. Honestly, I would almost say remove that, because it's only like 12 grand you can keep in there or something anyway, and you'd get an extra 3, so you'd have 15 grand towards your deposit instead of 20, which is great. Realistically, the idea of having a cap is just like, well, if you've got so much money you can buy £1 million house, you don't need this benefit from government, which I understand. But the problem is, like, London prices have got so ridiculous that even with the increase, I think it's 425 is it on, like, that won't get you a flat in a lot of places in London now. It definitely won't get you a house. And even in the southeast, so as soon as you're outside of London, it's up to 250. Well, you'd struggle to find a house for less than 250 southeast now. So I think that's one of those things where people have mentioned it. Martin Lewis, saving expert, mentions it. It would be a very easy win with not a massive amount of cost to the government, because essentially they're already promising, like, if that person just moves somewhere slightly cheaper, they're still going to get the money from the government. So it's not really, it's merely helping people stay where they want to live as opposed to moving around. I think that would be a fairly easy and cheap from the government to allow X number of first-time buyers to have a few grand more their deposit. It's not a big expense from.
That sounds simple, and I think that's the type of thing that the government want focused on, don't they? I think it's those type of wins that would be good for Labour. I think, just going back to the economic point, one thing that's come up as we've been talking about that, I was thinking, what a sensible idea. If you compare that to something like Rwanda, which has cost so many millions of taxpayers' money, where Labour will say they're getting the savings from is like, we're being much more, we have the same resources, but we're being much more efficient with where we spend it. And I think then putting the time and effort into what you've said there for the help to producers and all of that seems like far more sensible use of their time and effort and money. So, yeah.
And it's almost just on the table. Like experts are talking about this. It's an easy thing to fix.
Yeah.
Where you say, oh, we're going to fix that. And loads of people in kind of our age bracket are going to
Will
go,
see the benefit. Yeah,
that's helpful. And I can see an obvious benefit to me, even if it's not actually that expensive. It's actually a lot cheaper than reducing the tax burden on an individual, for example. Okay, so Lib Dems, I think we've already touched on, we think we'll probably get more seats than they currently have.
Yes, yeah.
Do you think they will? Well, okay, I think I'm going to put my flag down and say they're not going to beat Paddy Ashdown's. Is it 46?
46, yeah.
Yeah. So remember, the predictions are about 31, which is decent for the Lib Dems. I think there's maybe a few seats where, as we saw in the by-elections, maybe they'll do better than expected and beat out Labour in those places where we might expect a Labour win. But 46 is a lot, given they're still recovering the coalition.
Yeah, 46 is a lot. I think there's regional differences here. So you've got to see where they were in power before and where they can come back again. So they used to be quite big in Scotland, like particularly in some of like the Shetlands and the Highland Isles. They're there. I can't remember if those went SNP back or not, but I think they'll establish themselves there. And as you said, where the SNP start to lose votes, those will go back to Labour and the Lib Dems. So I can see them gaining there. Southwest as well. They used to have a load of MPs down in the Southwest. That went strongly Conservative after 2015. They've been slowly pegging those back. I can see areas like Devon and Cornwall, the places that are rural, not the cities, like Plymouth and Exeter, likely to go Labour or stay Labour. However, your Tonbridges, all of those, all these places in Devon, all these Devonshire constituencies where everybody, I've been there and that's lovely and green. That will probably go back to the Lib Dems because the Labour don't have any establishment there, and the Lib Dems did have MPs in fairly recent memory. We're talking a decade ago, if that. So that's where I think the Lib Dems are going to try and win big. That big number of 46, I'll go bold. I'll say that the level of the Conservative collapse is so big within England that they might be able to gather 50 seats. There we go. So just so we've got some bold predictions on
I like that. It's like I'm saying Labour are going to have a 1997.
I'm saying it's the Lib Dems.
No, because actually the Lib Dems are going to suddenly jump back.
Well, the Lib Dems are going to it's because the Conservatives are so weak on all sides. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else? I mean, Ed Davey's going to still be there because he's doing well, like we said in the last episode. I don't know if there's anything specific. They're not going to throw us some weird left field Brexit policy or something because it's all over.
No, I don't. I think that penny on the pound thing, they'll do that policy again. They always do.
Easy one to, easy one to say when you're not going to win. Yeah.
Yep. Yes, I think that'd be, and maybe, like you said, you were talking about LGBT issues and stuff. I think the Lib Dems will probably try and make themselves a leading voice on that. As in they'll say that we're the party that is brave enough to put ourselves forward and talk about that and be the advocate for these sort of issues. And they've done fairly well in the past.
They've generally been stronger on social issues, ahead of the curve on those kind of social issues. So, I mean, you'd like to think that someone will at least start fighting the good fight on that side. Okay, that's a few predictions of the Lib Dems quite quickly. I guess we're going for a little while now. So our other big, we said we're probably not going to really handle Brexit anymore as a separate topic. Do you want to handle the SNP because they're not having a big election this year, but obviously they're going to be affected?
I guess the footnote for the SNP is oh my goodness, big trouble. They've obviously been in power for a long time, longer than the Conservatives. You think about how long they've been the dominant force in Scottish politics. They don't have the same charismatic leader that they did before. And by that, I mean, I can't remember their name as well as they did. Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond were big forces within both British politics as well as just Scotland. The scandals that they have suffered in 2023 have certainly undermined them in the fact that they are seen as a less credible source of government. They've got long-term government problems where you have those issues of corruption, or you've been in power a long time now and things haven't quite as got better as you said they would. And ultimately, their fight for another referendum, like the second referendum, that kept the SNP going for 10 years after that result. I think heavily because people were no, there was an injustice that we lost. We must keep them in.
Especially with the effects of Brexit, where the big argument was stay with us, stay in the EU, and then we were like, and by the way,
so it just kept fueling them. But now, as we see the Brexit argument sort of rolling to an end, the independence argument is rolling to an end in terms of enthusiasm, or there might be a realism amongst the Scottish populace where they go, "Yep, I would love independence, but I accept that might be 25 years down the line before I can have my say again." Like it's often touted, these referendums are like once in a generation. So they are out of that now. So I think it will be a really tough night. They lost, if you think about like in the 2019 elections and 2017 under May and Corbyn, they actually lost some seats to the Conservatives because there was like a strong unionist vibe. There were people who were going against that. I don't think you'll see this time. I think they will see the Conservatives be largely rejected. As you said, they don't like them very much in Scotland. You'll see those results, those seats turning mostly back to Labour and the Lib Dems. How much go that way? That's the big question. I don't think they're going to go down to the levels that they were in 1997, which was 6, but I can see them being in is my wild Scottish, 15, 18 seats for the SNP. It could be a really bad night.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of touched on it. Like, if the SNP hadn't been as strong when Corbyn was there, there's a possibility we'd have had a Corbyn-led government.
Yeah.
So it has been for a long time, because is it 56 seats in Scotland?
Yeah, big.
So it is a decent chunk. It's should just shy of 10%. And for a long time, for most of the time, all the time we've been running this podcast, and also for quite a bit of time before that, it was solidly like a big chunk of them are SNP.
They were the third party. They were bigger than Lib Dems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So any change in that can massively affect. And I would really struggle to believe that many of them are going to flip to Conservative, given the general feeling towards it. It's not just I think there are less people who vote Conservative in Scotland in general. If you look at the previous results, that's often when Labour has done well. Often Labour has done well in Scotland, and that's part of it. But also, if you're stuck being ruled from somewhere you don't like, from Westminster, you're stuck in that position. The Conservatives have been doing it badly for 13 years, in your opinion. The obvious option is to at least vote for Labour out of though, if you're not voting for the SNP.
Yes.
Obviously, before they were voting for the SNP for different, but like I think, as you say, like the chance of an independence referendum soon is very slim, and people are starting to realise that no matter what they say, no one's going to let them. Unless Keir Starmer suddenly comes out and says something wild, like, "Oh yeah, I'll allow you to have a," but he wouldn't. It's just going to lose in votes, so he won't.
It sounds strange, but like the Conservative bashing of the SNP makes them have quite an adversarial relationship, where it's like, oh, if I'm going to vote for anybody other than the SNP, it certainly wouldn't be the Conservatives, right? Because they've been such at loggerheads. Whereas I think maybe amongst Labour, there's some people who in Scotland would go, well, they're probably not going to let me have an independence referendum, but at least they'll actually like understand Scottish issues and have a better idea of what's going on here, and we can work with them.
And so that's English politics, I think, out the way for our topics. The other big thing is the US presidential race. Mm-hmm. So any big predictions there?
Okay, so this is the big one. I'm going to say that you get Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. The Donald Trump issues, particularly with the places where he can't stand. I think is it Maine? That's the one that's just. There was a big one that was announced today, which was a swing state, like one of the bellwether states, where it said he can't stand. Which is a big issue, because I think the one before then was just like a solidly Democratic. Yeah,
it was just going to vote Democrats. So it doesn't really matter. It would affect his chance maybe of winning the overall vote, but that doesn't actually matter because it's all about.
Yeah. So the more of those states, particularly swing states or those with a lot of electoral college votes that turn against him, the more likely that is to go to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. I think the Supreme Court will probably let him run. That's my prediction there. I think he will get to run in the end, but I do think it would be a disaster for the Republican Party and America in general if he was allowed to run and win. I do think he is probably the most, for lots of reasons, but one of the least qualified people to run for the American presidency, given his general disdain towards the idea of democracy and the after effect of that 2020 election, where he went so conspiratorial, and the amount of people that he brought down with him. You forget, of all the legal things he's still got that Georgia case to go. about, the Capitol riots and the conspiracy against the jurors there. So he's got a lot on his plate. I don't think it's wise that those judges are trying to stop him from running, because it's got the same effect as, like, when you scroll down on an internet page and it says doctors won't tell you this, but you can lose. You get that feeling of like, well, if they're keeping it from me, I want it. Like I think it's like more likely to get more support amongst him if he feels he's not allowed to legitimately run. But I do think he's got, despite how poorly Joe Biden was doing in general polling earlier towards the end of this year, when it comes to crunch time, when people actually have to think about who their president will be, and it's not sort of like a protest poll. I think at the moment people are protesting in those polls to be like, Biden, you need to change your mind on what happens in Israel and Gaza. And even now you see American foreign policy shifting from just being 100% behind Israel to, I think we maybe should pull you out of Gaza a little bit and stop all the killing. Like a managed ceasefire is now becoming the policy of the American government that it wasn't a month ago. So I believe he can win those people that he's lost back to his side. And the people that he's losing, I don't think necessarily are switching to Trump either. So I'll predict a Biden win. I'm not sure it'll be a landslide. If it is a landslide, then wow, drama. Beyond Twitter or Truth Social, I guess. He doesn't use Twitter anymore, does he? But
he's been allowed back officially, but I don't think he posts there.
Yes, he doesn't want to. But yeah, that would be those are my general predictions for the US. I will need to do a little bit more research before I can give any definitive answer on what will happen in both the House and the Senate, because I think there's
I think I'm a little less bullish about Biden. Like, obviously, if they ban Trump from running and the Supreme Court upholds it, well, then obviously Biden, I think, will win. There's not, as we've discussed, there's not a strong Republican standing in the wings who can really take on Biden at the moment. I imagine the Supreme Court won't want to get entangled based on what I've heard, and also a lot of them are Trump appointees. They don't want to piss off Trump, even though they have done a good job of trying to make it clear they're not just voting for Trump. Like, they are a more conservative Supreme Court, but there are some things where they voted against kind of what would have been the Trump line, because they want to show that they are still independent. And in general, the conservative justices are going to vote the way that the conservatives want. So the Republicans, small C conservatives, I suppose big C conservatives. And then maybe I'm slightly less bullish. I think there are some concerns. I think if Biden gets out on the campaign trail and does it well, like his big thing in 2020 was that he was sat indoors a lot because of COVID, and that played really well against Trump being bombastic. He just kind of had to sit back, be sensible. And it was still quite a close run race. I think some of that Trump support has gone. Like, there's still that low level. Like you say, I think if he does run against Biden, probably a chance Biden will just win on the basis that people who might not vote for Biden aren't going to be voting for Trump. So overall, he's still going to win. There may be some more third party votes, but it doesn't really matter because it's America. Or some people may stay home. I would imagine you'd still probably be able to get the Democrat voters you'll get out. I don't know if you get as many. I don't know enough about like the feeling on the ground, like how many Trump supporters you're going to get out. But the two kind of things to touch on, you were saying earlier about this kind of how his thoughts on Israel and Gaza have affected things. But a big thing apparently at the moment in the US, I refer back to both Left, Right and Centre and Americast, which are two good podcasts to listen to on the subject. The more recent episodes will do you fine. But they've been talking about how it's the economy, stupid, right? The US economy has actually recovered. It's recovered better than ours has. But that the public haven't realised yet, essentially. So the public feeling is Biden has done bad for the... Like we said before in the previous episode, the president doesn't affect the economy that much. But the feeling is the economy is bad, and because of that, Biden is bad. Even though the economy is not that bad and has recovered and bounced back much quicker than people. So by the time they go to the polls, you would like to think that's filtered through. But right now, the feeling is among the average voter, apparently, not as favourable to Biden as you would like. That's a thing to be aware of. I'd like to think Biden would win. I guess I'm going to I'm going to say my prediction is Biden will win and get the second term.
You think
I'm not saying that. I think it's going to be close.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be worryingly close if Trump gets there and hasn't got any like legal reason for it. But I also agree with your concerns that if someone tries to block Trump, that fuels that group of people who are like, oh, it's all a conspiracy. Another thing to mention is that if Trump does get in, Trump's learnt from last time is the general so last time a lot of the reason Trump wasn't as bad as people expected was because there's in the same way we have the civil service over here, they have a whole load of people in their civil service who are kind of in job, and then you have these kind of heads of department who are like put in by Trump, but even those were vaguely sensible kind of Republican people, and like we know he fired a load of them really quickly because they wouldn't do what he said. So there was that kind of like, you can't just mess everything up. This time around, if Trump gets in, he has better prepared to have people who will do what he says in there. And we know that the people who do what he says often do illegal things and bad things.
Yeah.
Like look at Rudy Giuliani and people like that who are being sued to oblivion now. But, they actually have put the thought this time into how we'll replace all this stuff with Trump stuff. Yes. And I think that would be really bad.
Yeah.
Like, not a specific prediction, but yeah, if that comes to pass, that will be bad. Cool. Anything else you want to say on the US while we're here?
No, I think you've covered it really well. Thank you. No, okay. I'll take a listen to those podcasts you said. I need to get up to date with the US. So
I do like, just as an ad for other podcasts, Americast is the BBC's ones. They have their it's the equivalent to Newscast or Ukrainecast, but it's their reporters who are either in or paying close attention to the US, and they'll normally do like kind of emergency episodes about big. Left, right, and centre, I think is probably. I don't know if we have an equivalent there. And if any listeners are aware of an equivalent UK podcast, I'd like to hear it. What they have is the host is the centre, and kind of fields both sides. They'll have a Democrat and a Republican person on, cool. And every few months they switch up who those people are. So there'll be different members. They're not necessarily members of the establishment. They are like newspaper, reporters or political pundits or whatever.
Very clear where their political
and it's clear where their political opinions lie. The thing that I found interesting, especially all through Trump, is that like the Republicans they had on nearly all kind of like, I don't like Trump, but he's the person who got us into power.
Yeah.
And so they would often they'd talk about they were kind of again small c conservative Republican. They are like the rule of law is important and stuff, and I don't like Trump doing X, Y, and Z, but I'd still rather be in power than the Democrat. And it's interesting seeing that kind of stuff because it gives a space to hear that opinion on the other side. We don't often get, especially not we're fairly aligned in our politics. We're not suddenly sitting here being like, I have this really conservative view. So it is if there's a UK equivalent of that someone's aware of, I would love to be pointed in this direction. I think it'd be really interesting to hear that because as long as it is a reasonable conversation between two sides, as opposed to like people shouting at each other, I think it is interesting to hear what the other side think and why. Because often I can't understand. It seems impenetrable from outside especially when there's like slinging matches on Twitter. So yes, that'd be good to hear. So those are our predictions for 2024. There'll probably be a new podcast in a few weeks. We've recorded this a bit early, so you've had these two episodes kind of staggered a bit because I forgot to move house. But then, we'll get back into the usual swing of things once things are settled down. Thanks, Rob, as always, for joining me. Thank you. In person, we're like a metre away looking at each other.
Tap his microphone. I won't tap his microphone, but no.
Makes it a lot easier to like know when to take a cue to come in because we don't normally record with video. So it does make it a bit easier to record. Hopefully easier to edit. As always, you can find us at parliamentary.observer, a domain name I'm always surprised they let us have. You can find us at patreon.com/TTSS, where if you throw $1 a month our way, you will get access to bonus content related to the podcast and our other podcasts. And, you help us pay for microphones and trips to go see each other around the country so we can record face to face, things like this. And you can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Unparl Podcast. You can find us on Facebook as Unparliamentary Language. You can find us on Reddit at /r/unparliamentary. And there's nothing left for me to say other than it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Just going to touch his face.